Hey everybody, happy Monday. My name is Minda Hartz and I'm your host of Secure the Seat, your weekly show here on LinkedIn Live, and we stream on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I think that's all the places. And so happy that you're here. I hope that you recovered from a long weekend. I hope that you had a good time over the holidays. I know sometimes it can be um, happy and sometimes it can be anxiety depending on what you're doing and who you're spending it with. But I hope that you had a good time. I know for me, it just felt good to have a little rest. I was so tired by the time Thanksgiving rolled around that I was like crawling there, and it felt good for me to just like rest and recuperate a little bit. And so, how was your weekend? How did you celebrate, or did you rest? Did you do anything fun? Did you take advantage of any Black Friday sales? I did. I can even tell you all what I ended up buying. I'm typically not a shopper on Black Friday, but I did buy some like funny things. But I did want to let you know, in case you weren't aware, for earlier this year, I hosted a writers retreat called the Secure the Seat Writers Retreat. I do it once a year, and so I'm offering the pre-recorded sessions at a discounted price for Black Friday. So we're going to drop that link in. We have a bunch of new students that joined the cohort because I want you to be able to have your book out in the world for 2022. Don't delay. I know some of you probably been sitting on a book idea for a very long time. And so I'm going to tell you, time waits for no one. So if you are curious about how to get started, what to do, there were so many things that I didn't know as a first-time author that I'm still even learning as a second-time author. So I want to share that with you because I feel like they say content is king, but information is queen. Okay, so we want you to have all the information that you need. So we're going to drop that Secure the Seat. It's $400 off the original price in that. So tell folks. Really excited to have you join us. But today I'm really excited about our conversation because I get to have. I really do love Mondays because I get to chop it up with really intelligent and amazing folks. And so Dr. Sheena Mason, she is a facilitator, an educator, an author, a whole lot of things, probably even things that I don't even know after looking at her website, but you're going to learn more about her today. We're going to talk about freeing ourselves from racism. Her organization is doing some really phenomenal stuff. And so I want us to make sure that we have all the information we need going into the work week. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring Dr. Mason to the stage. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm happy to be here with you, Minda. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy that they could be anywhere on the internet right now, and they're here with you and me. So we don't take that lightly. Dr. Mason, can you tell everybody a little bit more about you for those who may not be familiar with your work?
So I recently earned my doctorate from Howard University, the Howard University. Go Bisons. I specialize in African American, American, and Caribbean literature. And the subject of my dissertation and forthcoming book is focusing on how many well-intended people are unintentionally upholding the problem of racism. And that same work is a genesis for my educational consulting business called Theory of Racistness, where we specialize in helping people liberate themselves from racism.
That liberation is key, y'all. Let me get my tambourine handy because I know we're going to have some tambourine moments in this conversation. And I'm so thankful that you're doing this work. I know those of us that are in this dismantling systems work, it's not easy, but it's worth it. And we're leaving systems better than we found it. So thank you for your work. I want to start with your organization. Tell us more about the theory of racelessness and its mission and kind of what you're doing and how you're working with folks.
There are 6 philosophies of race that are almost never taught, but each of us holds 2 of these philosophies. 3 speak to what a person thinks race is, and 3 speak to what a person thinks should be done with race. The first category is something called naturalism. If you're a naturalist, you believe that race is biological. It's in your DNA, it's ancestry, it's all the things. The second category is constructionism. If you are a constructionist, you believe that race may not be biological, but it's rendered real in very real ways as a social construction. And the third category is something called skepticism. Skeptics argue that race is not biological and it doesn't exist as a social construction. It is non-existence. The next three categories that speak to what a person thinks should be done with race include Reconstructionism, which is the sort of default position in American society. If you're a Reconstructionist, you're probably a constructionist, and you argue that we should just reconstruct race to inflict less violence on folks. The second category is something called Conservationism. If you're a conservationist, you're probably a naturalist. You want to keep the concept of race. And then the last category is something called eliminativism. If you're an eliminativist, you're likely a skeptic, sometimes a constructionist, and you argue that the concept of race itself should be eliminated, eradicated, done away with. Theory of racistness speaks to a skeptical position of race and an eliminativist position of race. So in one sense, I argue that we're all raceless. The thing people point to and say that's race or racial, it's actually racism camouflaging itself, because racism is race, it creates race, it's all the things race, or it's ethnicity, culture, other things that do exist that have meaningful impacts on people, but what it's not is race. So in that way, we're raceless. But the eliminativism speaks to the point that most people in society view race as a construction. So to eliminate racism, we actually have to eliminate the concept of race. We have to eliminate the unicorn, expose it for what it is, to help people outside of the quagmire of racism. So in that way, racistness is an aspiration or a goal.
Ooh, I don't know about y'all, but I think we're in Dr. Mason's class. I hope you got your notes. She is taking us to school, y'all, and congratulations on getting your PhD. We celebrate you. So that's really, really awesome. But so much in that, and I imagine that a lot of what you just said will also be in your upcoming book, right?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Oh, hi, Scotty.
You see some folks, you know?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. You know, the other question I wanted to dive into, because you know we talk a lot, or we're talking more about race in a broader scope inside the workplace, and diversity is definitely a big buzzword. But how can we celebrate diversity and stop unintentionally upholding racism in the workplace?
A fundamental part of that, as an outcome, if we're serious about it, it means that we have to recognize the non-existence of race, which is that's the hardest part for people when it comes to holding their feet to the fire and testing their ideas, is recognizing the non-existence of race. Part of the problem with what I call racialist ideology is because we believe in because racism masquerades itself as race. When we try to work against racism, we do it from within the confines of race. And it's sort of ironic because many people are constructionists and they'll say race was created to subjugate people, right? With the primary purpose of subjugating people. But then we want to embrace racial identity. I want you to see my racial identity. I want you to embrace it. I want you to honor it. All of those things, which is really ironic when it's racism masquerading itself. So part of the way that we get ourselves out of this quagmire, and part of the way we help other people who might otherwise be resistant to a constructionist framework because they don't want to be racialized as the oppressor, for example, is to encourage people to see themselves as raceless. If you are raceless, if you are in the theory of racistness classroom, you see yourself as raceless. And from that raceless perspective, we can then see how race, i.e. racism, operates in our society. We can be more clear-eyed about it. We can more readily identify the problem of racism, which then means we can be empowered to get creative about solving the problem. Whereas if we continue to do things in the ways that we do, which is privileging the idea of race, having affinity groups, all the things, in the name of diversity, what happens is our actual differences that cut across race, right, get ignored, get obscured, because the presumption is if you are racialized in a particular way, you're the same as other people, or you think the same way as other people in the so-called racial group, or you participate in culture in the same ways, which is usually some sort of stereotypical version of what culture actually is. So in this way, our actual diversity gets obscured because we're privileging a sort of external diversity, which the external diversity exists. But if we're wanting to do more meaningful work and get outside of the confines of racism, we have to encourage and empower people to see diversity of thought, to see diversity of personality, to see diversity of cultural inclinations, right? And to see how we share more than we differ. Because right now, privileging differences, especially as it pertains to a person's appearance, for example, actually prevents people from seeing shared humanity and the things that they have in common, which I think is a fundamental problem in the work that we're doing when really we're trying to bring people together. So I just want to be clear that I'm not saying we should hide diversity or differences or devalue those differences, but I am saying that those differences aren't racial.
Interesting. I appreciate your perspective, because I think it's important for us to have these type of conversations out loud, because I know that it pushes us to think a little differently, like, or unlearn some things or hold tighter to some things that we do believe in. And so I appreciate you um, teasing that out for us so we can understand it. I want to take a couple questions that I see that are coming in from a couple platforms. There's one person here that says, conservatism is a form of racism. Did I hear that correctly? Could you talk a little bit about that, please, Dr.?
Sure.
Thanks.
No, I'm glad you asked the question. Thank you so much. So no, that's not what I said. It's conservationism. So there's a difference there, right? There's a way in which in American society being conservative does get conflated with being racist. That's a thing. That's a belief that many people hold on to. That's not a belief that I personally hold on to, but that is a belief. That's not the same thing as what I'm saying here. Conservationists want to conserve or keep the idea of race, not conservatives.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Another one wanted, I see, I'm paraphrasing because it's kind of long, but what are your thoughts about ERGs, employee resource groups, or business resource groups? Do you feel like those are necessary? And that's true. We're seeing some companies implement them, some are taking them away. That's a great question. Curious your thoughts on that.
I think the sort of nefarious, seemingly innocuous part of that kind of research is that at the core of what people are researching, what these corporations are researching, for example, is the idea of race. So all of the data is going to be coming from this sort of racialized framework and lens, which I think then has the unfortunate effect of naturalizing the existence of race even to their employees' imaginations, to the leadership's imaginations, so that again the organization as a whole ends up staying within the quagmire of racism. And I see this being true and applicable in our anti-racist practices outside of business, right? Where people, very well-intended people, are doing diversity, equity, inclusion work and imparting on those efforts. But the general consensus is that the organizations are doing it from a liability standpoint as opposed to actually solving the problem. And I think the way that they're approaching the problem with the naturalizing the idea of race is only going to uphold the same problem that they're professing themselves to want to get out of. So I think that the groups themselves are fine, but I think that there has to be a more creative, more concise way to get the information that they want to find within the organizations, as opposed to focusing everything on the concept of race.
Listen, thank you for that. I really appreciate that distinction that you made, and a different way to think about it, because I do think a lot of companies are creating them out of liability, right? Let's just hush this group up. Let's hush this group up. There's a place you could go, but is it really fundamentally, dismantling the systems that they were created for in the first place? So thank you for that. if you want to, I'm sure after today's conversation, you're going to want to catch the replay. So after today's show, you will be able to watch. If you're watching right now on LinkedIn, you'll be able to catch it on YouTube and get your notes out again and share this with someone. We're going to drop Dr. Mason's information in the chat so that you can stay connected and hire and follow her work. And it's just really good. We need various voices out in the world that we can look to, and especially in times like this. One last question that I had before we jump into our bonus round is, do you think it's possible to free ourselves of racism, and what steps can we take? Because I know that many of us are tired, right? We're tired, we've been tired, but where does the freedom lie?
I hold on to hope that we can and we will transcend racism. And I get this question a lot because it seems not just like a gargantuan task, but it also seems inevitable that we can't get out of it for a lot of people. A lot of people profess, or I would even say confess, that those feelings to me. I hold on hope that we can transcend these problems. And I think that if we're clear-eyed about our outcomes, what the actual outcomes are that would indicate to us that we've made some measurable progress, if we get it out of our minds that we can somehow police thought and eradicate racism altogether, I think that would be helpful, because not for nothing, we just need the statistical majority of people in the nation to come to this freed way of thinking in order for the radical change to take effect that I think most of us want to happen. We don't need 100% of people to not be racist or to be against racism to get what we want out of life, out of society, out of our country, and so on. I think that's important to say, because when I say it, some people might be nodding their heads in agreement, like, yeah, that makes sense. But there's a way in which this is framed in public discourse that gives me the distinct impression that the expectation is that, yes, we can get to 100% that goal. And I mean, if you know anything about human beings, we can't agree 100% on what color the sky is or the grass is, what specific blue or green we're talking about here. So we definitely can't do that as it pertains to something even that much more tenuous, which is racism. And so I think if we have that in mind, that makes it more possible and more tangible. But I do know that the way we can't get out of it is the way that we're continuing to do anti-racist work, by upholding the idea of race. Because if we go back a century, we see people treating race as a construction and working to reconstruct it. Right? Frederick Douglass, Harriet Jacobs, prominent abolitionists were reconstructing what it means to be Black in American society. Then you have people during the Harlem Renaissance doing the same thing. The Black arts movement, the civil rights movement, the Black power movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. These are constant and persistent efforts to reconstruct the meaning of race from a constructionist position, which to me is part of the evidence for what I'm saying and why we can't get out of or transcend racism. It's because we're upholding the idea of race in really unintentional ways. And if we're upholding the idea of race, we're upholding racism. So we can't transcend it if we keep going about it in this manner. But if we open our minds to alternatives, to alternative ways of viewing ourselves and other people, and if we lead with love, we can absolutely change course and inspire other people to do the hard work, which really is a matter of unlearning and then also learning a wealth of information in African-American activism in this country that has been marginalized and excluded from the public domain.
Listen, you said a mouthful, and what I love about what you're talking with us about today is you're giving us another way to look at race in different ways, right? And I think it's important for us to be able to see it from a lot of different perspectives. So regardless of if you agree with what we're talking about today or not, one thing that I hope you will agree with is that Dr. Sheena said, let's lead with love, because I feel like in order to get to this work, do this work, we're gonna have to lead with some love. Otherwise, it makes us sicker, and racism, as you know, with the work that I do with Right Within, it's like we can heal ourselves, right? Regardless of what Bob or Kim do or don't do, or what what trainings they get or don't get, right? Like, but we can do that for ourselves. And I hope that you all will go back and listen to this again and kind of just think through, let's challenge ourselves. I think it's important that we be able to come to the table and have these kinds of conversations. And there's so many different perspectives. So, thank you for that, Dr. Sheena. Want to jump into our bonus questions. For those who've never watched To Cure the Sea, I am a lover of grits and rap lyrics. My work is immersed in pop culture, and I love a good bowl of grits. Dr. Sheena, are you a grits eater?
Shrimp and grits all day. That's my favorite way to have grits.
You know what? I'm glad that you said the S word, shrimp, and not sugar. We can rock with each other. Yes, thank you very much. I'm here for it. And a good bowl of grits and a great rap lyric go good hand in hand. And I'm just curious, what is your favorite rap lyric and why?
So I had this question in advance, right? And it was so hard to pinpoint lyrics, but I'll go with my favorite rap song, at least on this day. Savage, but the remix with Beyonce. Listen, I have a doctorate in English literature. I love language. I love puns. I love play on language. And I love how people take certain words and use them as a form of resistance, much like how racialized Black people have tried to take the word Black, right, and to reconstruct it into a source of empowerment. It's become all of the things, right, even outside of, but including race. And so the way that they play on language in that song and just like the funness of it, but then also the mutual hyping up. I mean, I think that's something we need more of, perhaps, especially as you're saying earlier, when we initially think we might disagree with something. I always invite folks to learn more before you make such assertions, because you can't, I don't know, in my mind, you can't really agree or disagree with something you don't know about. If you're being presented with new information, such as that which I'm presenting you with today, it strikes me that you can't necessarily agree or disagree, right? And that song Savage and the camaraderie between Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion, I just feel like it's reflective of leading with love and of each one teach one, like Beyonce being the sort of mother bee figure to Megan Thee Stallion.
I love that. And I think that perspective is so good. And they make similar music, but different music, right? But they both have this understanding and love, sisterhood for each other. And when you're talking about leading with love, I think that that's really important. And we all need that. I'm a firm believer that success is not a solo sport. We can't do this work alone, right? We need all hands on deck. So thank you for that. The last question that I wanted to ask you is, we are all leaders. We don't have to have a title to lead. We can all activate that right now. What is one piece of advice you would give all of our leaders watching today on how to make the workplace better than they found it?
Sound very romantic over here, but I have to emphasize the leading with love. Before earning my doctorate, I was a general manager at 24 Hour Fitness. I worked in 5 different states for them. I had a team of just under 100 employees in San Jose, California, and I found such success in that space. And Teach for America, I work with the Freedom Project Network. Everywhere I go, I found the success that I have primarily because I lead with love and I allow myself to be vulnerable in spaces that we're often taught to be machines in a way. And I think that's especially true, and especially what will help us be most successful in this work against racism in DEI spaces is really and authentically loving the people that you're working with and recognizing that although different people are meeting you in different places, everyone has the capacity to learn, to grow, and to transcend their current beliefs. And me getting to where I am today, intellectually and emotionally, spiritually, was a journey for me, a long journey for me. And every single one of us has the capacity to get to the other side of whatever the goalpost is.
I love that so much. And, as you were talking, I was thinking things that I've changed my mind about, right? That I learned one particular thing or had ideas about a certain thing or person or whatever have you. And I realized, wow, where is this coming from? Where is this belief that I don't have to be married to my beliefs either, right? There's certain things that we do learn that we hold on to, but over time we realize through experience and living a little bit of life that sometimes those things that we once thought were true, we realize that there's nuances, right? There's different things. So thank you so much. We're going to drop your information back in the chat so that people can stay. I know that the chat was like on fire, hearing these different perspectives that you dropped today, Dr. Sheena, and I appreciate it. But I want to take one last question. Does race matter? Is that your perspective? So that I'm paraphrasing a bit, but curious how I know we only have a little bit of time, so it's probably a longer answer, but I'll let you get to it.
Racism matters. And there's a difference.
Listen, mic drop. Dr. Sheena didn't say. She said racism matters, and that is the key here. And that's what I hope that we're all trying to dismantle those racist systems that many of us are exposed to each and every day. Any final thoughts as we go into this work week that you'd love to leave everybody with?
I feel like I've left everything on the table, which is kind of hard to do in 30 minutes. So you're a very good interviewer. Thank you for having me on, truly. And maybe we could do a part 2. I would love to come back and speak with you more.
Yes, I would love that too, because I know that you set up a mini class for us today, and I can just feel like the energy in the chat that people have like more thoughts about this, right? And as they settle in and learn more about the work that you're doing too, I know that some different ideas will pop up there. And so we're going to drop that in the chat. Thank you again, Dr. Mason, for the work that you're doing, how you're showing up, how you're challenging us to think about our stance on race and racism in different ways. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. We'll be back here next week, next Monday at 9 a.m. West Coast, noon East Coast. And the last thing I want to tell you is make sure that you treat yourself good this week. Do something that makes you smile. Yesterday, a designer that I love and support, Virgil. I'm a sneakerhead for those who don't know that, and I love off-white sneakers. And this young man, he did so much in 41 years, right? And so don't delay whatever that thing is that you want to do. Start doing it today, right? If you need to call somebody and tell them that you love them, whatever, you need to cut people out of your life, you need to secure a seat, you need to ask for a raise, like do the things that you need to do. Don't wait to say, I'm gonna do it when I'm 60, I'm gonna do it when I'm 70. Today is that day. And so I just wanna thank you all for your time. Make sure that you follow us and share this replay. It'll be on YouTube at the end. And then also I wanna thank my counterpart, Michael, behind the scenes for always holding us down. So have a great day, and we'll see you next week.